let's get started, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about sampling, which is really fun because I love sampling. I think it's probably the way I make music the most. I make a lot of sample-based stuff. Yeah, so I'm excited about this one. We're gonna basically we kind of already have like built a couple like skills, I guess, that you would need for sampling, which is like audio manipulation. We've talked a lot about Simpler, which is probably my favorite Ableton instrument. So we kind of have a knowledge of sampling already from the previous tutorials. Hopefully I did a good job with that. But I'm gonna do a brief overview again of some simple audio manipulation stuff. So the first thing is when you drag in an audio file, I just have this drum loop that you're just hearing. There are different ways you can warp the audio, different modes. So there's beats mode, which is warping it based on some sort of rhythm. So right now I'm warping it so it's warped based on transients, which is basically when the audio file is like hitting its peaks or whatever. So each of the drum hits is basically a transient. But you can warp it to like every quarter note, every eighth note, every 16th note. We've talked about this, and then you can change the mode of firing it. So this basically like stops the sample after a certain period of time. So you're making the drums like way more tight versus this, which is way more open and loose. This is literally like just hearing the transient of each drum. So that's one of the warp methods. There's tones, which you can warp. It's kind of hard to hear because the drum here. You can kind of hear it more like this. It's very granular. You can change the grain size. Might be hard to tell the difference with a sample like this, but you can really tell on like a vocal sample. I wanted to use like a vocal sample. Oh, hi Luke. Hello, this is super cool. Thank you. I try. Yeah, next we're gonna talk about texture, whatever. We've already talked about this. Grain size and flux. I explained that I didn't really know what flux did, but it makes the sample sound interesting. You get this like really drunk feel. Repitch is just pitching the sample in order to fit the tempo. So it's going to pitch it down automatically since we slowed down the sample, and as I speed up the tempo, it's going to pitch up. Sounds great. And then we can have the complex modes, which are my favorite. They sound kind of the most natural. And then also Complex Pro, where you can actually change the formants, which we talked about is like the timbre of a sound. Basically, it's the difference between you saying like or ooh or ee, that type of stuff. That was the stupidest thing. I don't know why I did that, but you know what I mean. You're changing the timbre of the sound. It's hard to hear again on a drum sample. But yeah, those are the different warp modes. So we talked about that. That's one way of audio manipulation, and obviously you can drag. If you shift and drag any of these markers, you can change the length of a sample. Sounds great. Yeah, anyway, so you got some fun stuff like that. And then we also talked about Simpler, which is a MIDI instrument. So I need to actually grab that guy quickly. Where is he? Simpler. Look at that. Beautiful. So Simpler allows you to basically just drag in any sample that you want, and you're able to trigger it like a MIDI instrument, which we've talked about MIDI. Obviously, we had a whole lesson on it previously. But yeah. Yeah, so you're able to trigger with your keyboard or whatever instrument, which is interesting. Hopefully people are watching this. Say hi in the chat if you're logged in, And then obviously you have the slice mode, which is kind of an interesting mode where it slices based on a certain parameter. So I'm slicing based on transients. You can slice based on a beat. So you can slice every quarter note, or a region. So you can divide this section into, let's say, 41 regions. And what the slice mode does is it maps each slice to a different key on your keyboard, which is really interesting. So you can get some interesting like chops. I mean, that's really basic stuff, but yeah, these are all things that we've talked about earlier. Hopefully everyone knows kind of the basics and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of the basics of sampling, but I'm going to talk more kind of holistically about sampling, I guess. Like, in my view, there's like 5 different ways you can manipulate a sound, maybe 5, maybe more. There's like, you can stretch it, chop it, you can reverse it, you can do some sort of like granular, I guess like like I don't know the word for it. Like you can really make a sound very granular, or you can use like a section of a sound and play it as an instrument or something like that. And then there's obviously just like having the sample itself, being like very generous with the way that you use the sample, I guess. So, and you can obviously use those in combination with each other. So I didn't really know how I was going to show you guys like how sampling would work. Like I was going to bring in a sample and then like chop it, and I had a sample ready, and then I forgot that because of copyright reasons I probably can't use it. I wanted to use this one song, but I couldn't do it, and then I couldn't find like something in time before I had to start the stream. So I was thinking, oh, maybe I can just go through some of my songs and like show you guys how I sampled from it. But before we do that, I'm just going to do a quick little demo of a couple more audio manipulation things you can do. So obviously we showed how you can pitch with MIDI by just playing different notes on your keyboard. But another thing you can do is like you can pitch with the audio effect here. You can change the pitch slider, which I just selected. You can move it down. Oh, sorry, I forgot this was like sped up again. Still, my fault. Let me just slow it down again. So you can change the pitch. So I just pitched it down. And depending on like what warp mode you're on, you can get really interesting sounds when you play with the pitch in the warp mode, which is fun. And then you can pitch it up. Like obviously this sounds nothing like the original sample, right? But you know, you've like messed around with the sample enough where it sounds completely like that sounds, that's kind of an interesting sound. I could definitely use something like this. Which is kind of crazy. Another thing that's big is you can obviously move audio into simpler that's like not drum based. Like you can put vocal chops and you can put melodies and stuff. Again, I would show you this if I had a melody that wasn't copyrighted, but I'm really stupid and I downloaded a bunch of melodies that were copyrighted, and I realized that the stream would get taken down. So my fault. But yeah, I guess that's some basic stuff with sampling. Another thing that I want to talk about quickly before I show you maybe a project file or something like that of stuff that I've worked on in the past is like effects, because like I realized I had not covered that in any tutorial ever, which is probably not good. So let me change this back so it sounds normal again. And we're gonna just talk about some basic effects that you can use to also kind of manipulate your audio. So one of those effects that's really important, I think probably the most important effect of them all, is EQ. And Ableton has this great EQ called EQ8. It's really simple. Basically what EQ does is it allows you to isolate, cut, or boost or reduce certain frequency ranges in your audio. What does that mean? Let's say I like this drum break, but I think, oh, that hi-hat is like, there's too much of that hi-hat. I kind of, that guy got to chill a little bit. What you can do is you're able to use EQ8 to like filter out certain frequencies. Like, oh, maybe some of the high frequencies are clashing with something else. I can like filter those out. And the way you do that is by using these bands down here. So you can see I have 1, 2, and 3, and 4 selected. This is like the automatic ones. I can use this. I can like click on any of these circles and like drag them around, and it will affect the shape of the audio. So if I do something like this, basically this blue line is showing you which frequencies you're keeping high and which ones you're decreasing or boosting. So in this case, I'm decreasing the higher frequencies with this 4. So what will that sound like on the audio? It sounds a little more muffled. You can hear less of the hi-hat. If I decrease even more, you can basically only hear the kick and the snare. I mean that's not true, but if I do the reverse and I boost it, you can hear the high end so much more, right? So kind of interesting, I mean it's really simple, but this is like the most important like effect that you're gonna use. I think I use an EQ on like every single layer of like every single song ever, because like it's important to be able to like control which frequencies you're allowing through. Another thing you can do with EQ8, obviously you can change this around, so I can have something that looks crazy like this. So this is basically like cutting all of the low end and boosting the high end. So what this is kind of good for is like, let's say I wanted to add another kick. Oh, sorry, my fault. This computer is so strange. Like the keyboard, it's like a Mac, so the control is different. It's like a command or whatever. Let's say I wanted a different kick. Let's just look at some of the Ableton kicks here. If I filter out the kick in this original one, so you can still hear the kick, but what I can do is I can actually grab. You can change like the mode that each of these EQ bands is. So I can change it to like basically cut audio. So there's this one, which basically means everything below a certain frequency is going to be cut. Or there's like this one, which allows you to like dip or boost audio like this. Or there's this one, which is like a cut at a certain frequency in the middle. Or there's this thing which is called a shelf, I believe, which allows you to do kind of what we did with this 4 earlier, where you're like shelving. It looks like a shelf, basically. You're either boosting or reducing certain frequencies like this. Those are kind of the main ones that you have. Yeah. So I can do a cut of all low frequencies. So all you actually hear of the kick drum now is the high end, is the transient basically. You don't really hear any of that loud like thumping like low end. So this is helpful if I don't like a kick of a certain sample, I can add my own kick. Like this one is way more thumpy, right? And I can you can copy, obviously Control C, and then to paste it you can like Control V. Oh, guys, I'm still getting used to Mac. Like obviously this sounds bad, but I'm basically like switching out the kick, right? And something like that. Obviously it doesn't sound great, but you know what I mean. So that's EQ. You can do some really crazy things with EQ. You can like really boost certain frequencies and get some weird sounds. I don't know. This doesn't sound good, but you know what I mean. So that's EQ. Another really important one is reverb. I think this is like the second most important one. Reverb is basically adding space to your audio. Oh yeah, I forgot this computer has a fancy reverb that I don't have on my Ableton. But basically, it has this knob, which is dry wet, which is basically, most effects have this knob. It's basically saying like what percentage of audio or what percentage of that effect you're letting through. So dry means that it's 100% the original audio. If you have it on 100% dry or 0% wet, sorry. And if you have it on 100% wet, all you're going to get is the effect. Right? So reverb is adding this space or like it's basically like you're taking your audio and then you're placing it in like a room of some sort, and then you know how there's like echoes in rooms and whatever. It's basically letting you have that like space for audio. Really important, really important. You can change things like the decay, which is basically how long the reverb is. So this is allowing the reverb to be really long, or I can have it be really short. You know what I'm saying? There's all this other stuff, pre-delay. There's this like EQ within the reverb to show like how much of the sound you're actually letting through, or like what quality of the sound you're letting through. Is it mainly high end? Is it low end? There's chorus. You can play around with these effects and like figure out what the sweet spot is, but the most important, I think, is size, decay, and dry wet. Basically, that's it. So you can have something that sounds way more spacious. Yeah, fun. And then another important one is delay. This is really important. Delay is basically like what it sounds like. You're just delaying the sound. You're making echoes. So my favorite effect, so you can change the way, the time that you're delaying it. So I can change it to every quarter note, my fault. You can change it to every 4 beats, every 8 beats, every 16 beats, every 3 beats, every 2 beats. Or you can also change it to time. So there's this button that says sync. You can change that to time. So it's going to delay 375 milliseconds. This is going to delay 13.5 milliseconds. This is going to delay 5 seconds, etc. This is an EQ again. So you can say, okay, well, I'm going to delay it, but when it comes back, it's only going to be this specific range of frequencies when it comes back. So you can hear it's all the high end that's coming back because I've isolated the high end here. So also really important technique. And then you can change the mode. So there's repitch, fade, jump. I think the biggest, most important one is ping pong, which basically is letting you put the delay in either ear. You're actually not going to be able to hear this because I have to down mix the audio to mono when I stream, which basically just means there's no information of like which headphone sound is coming through. So you're not going to be able to hear things in your left and right headphone, but this is what ping pong would do, is it would say, okay, we're going to delay, and it's going to play in your left headphone, then your right headphone, then your left headphone, then your right headphone, stuff like that. And then there's this knob for feedback, which is basically like how many times it's going to delay. And then dry wet is, again, the same thing with reverb. It's basically saying like how much of the effect you're going to let seep through your audio or whatever. So that's another important one. There's like a million effects. I'm actually just gonna go through all of the effects and like see if there's any like interesting ones that I can talk about. Beat repeat, delay. Beat repeat is like, it's useful, but it's like difficult to use. It basically allows you to repeat certain sections of audio. I've used it before, but very rarely. It's a very specific technique. Echo, I've never used, to be honest. Filter delay. Okay, yeah, so there's different types of delay. Filter delay is basically delaying based on different like ranges of the audio. So this is a delay on frequencies from 704 hertz, 449 hertz, 818 hertz, basically. Basically, it's just like, I don't know how to describe it. It's basically just like choosing different bands of audio and delaying based on those frequency ranges. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, there's actually a billion. I don't think there's really, all of these ones under drive and color are all based on like amplifying sound or doing like stuff with like distortion, boosting sounds, saturating sounds. You get all of these really like interesting. Actually, I'll put something, one of my favorite things is drum bus. You can really mess around with these and get like really like booming drums. Like, I'm not gonna mess around with it now. I think the best way to learn how these effects work is really to like try yourself and like go through and test them yourself. Like that's kind of how I learned how to do all of this. Like I just kind of got the software and I didn't know how to use it, and I just like played around with it a lot until I understood it. Maybe watched a couple of YouTube tutorials and stuff like that. But the main thing is like you really want to actually like practice and like literally try everything. Like I recently really got into Redux, which is this plugin, or not plugin, this effect that basically like changes the timbre of your audio and like reduces the quality of it basically. So you can change the bit rate of the audio, which is like a fancy way of just saying like you can make it sound like it's coming through a shitty MP3 player or something. So like I knew this effect existed, but I was like, oh, it's not really useful. There's not really many times I can use it, but I've been using it a lot because you can actually really mess around with some of these effects and these like the rate knob, the dry wet, obviously, the pre and post filter, all this stuff. You can basically like I play around with all of the audio effects until I get something interesting. Another really important one is compression. Wow, I can't believe I missed this one. And I also can't believe I'm talking about effects during the sampling thing, but I think it's important. I promise I'll open like a project file soon. My fault. Compression is basically, how do I describe compression? It's basically like taking the audio and basically saying like all of the stuff that's really quiet, we're gonna make it louder in a certain way. And all of the stuff that's really loud, we're going to make it quiet in a certain way. It's taking all of the audio peaks and the audio, like the low parts of the audio, and like making them all kind of sound the same volume in a way. And this can be done really subtly, or this can be done like really, really intensely. That's not a really good description of a compressor, but that's basically what it does. So you probably can't hear it very well. Maybe something like this, you can kind of tell. Like you can hear there's way more noise. You can hear all of the kind of quiet stuff in between the drums is being amplified. That's kind of what compression does. Really important as well. Yeah, I mean, there's a million effects. I'll probably go through these at some point, at one point or another, but really just go in and play around. I think those are the most important ones. Oh, and utility, last one, I promise, and then I'll open a project file. You can change the width of a sound, the gain, which is how loud it is. So I apologize if you're wearing headphones. This might be very loud. My fault. That was really loud. And then balance, which is basically like which ear it's playing in. You can make a sound mono, which basically says there's going to be no left-right information. Everything's going to be in the center. You can do mono to just bass frequencies. Some people think that's really important. It probably is. I actually don't really care like if bass frequencies are like in phase, or sorry, like in your left ear or right ear. Sometimes that it's important for like some technical things. So some people say like make sure to make your basses mono, but I don't really think it matters that much. But yeah, the really important one as well, just for like basic stuff. It has a lot of utility. No pun intended. Okay, guys, I'm so sorry. I'm Yapperville over here. Is anyone in chat? Man, I know it's exam season, but damn. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly open a project file. Again, I wanted to do a different project file, but I realized I might get sued, and like I would get copyright stricken, and then this whole tutorial would disappear right after, which is not very fun for anybody. Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna just open a file right now, and I don't know why it's not opening. Okay, it's loading. Yeah, so I wanted to show an example of sampling, I guess, from like a song that I made. So I'm so sorry you're gonna have to hear it. No one in chat? Okay. That's fine. We'll make do. So the song I'm going to choose is the song called Heron. The reason I chose it is because the sample in it is royalty free, i.e. it's just me playing piano myself. I was just kind of improvising piano, and then I sampled myself. So Yeah, that's the reason I'm showing you. And also, I have some other sampling techniques that are kind of interesting. So yeah, I guess I'll show you some of this. I wanted to show you like more interesting stuff, like more interesting sampling techniques. And I have songs where I've used simpler a lot in like weird ways, but it would just get the video copyrighted, which is not fun. So I'm going to switch back now. Welcome to the session. Yeah, so this is again my song Heron. It kind of sucks ass, but yeah. This was the beginning of the song, was this piano thing here. As you can see, I used an EQ on it, which we just learned about. So if you're paying attention, I guess it's filtering out the high end and then filtering out some of the super low frequencies at the bottom here. Anyway, I think I can play you the sample. I may as well. Let me just. Oops, my fault. Guys, I'm still not used to this keyboard. Hopefully there's nothing embarrassing in this sample. So yeah, it's this really long, oh my gosh, really long improvisation that I did on a piano. A really old, terrible piano. Anyway, so kind of weird texturally. There's a lot of background noise. You can hear like the TV in the background, stuff like that. I really like that. I like when samples that I use have a lot of texture and stuff. I think that's one of the most important things, is like sample choice more than anything. Like that is very, very important. I think a lot of people try to choose samples that they think, like, some of the most interesting samples are the ones that you have to like put a lot of work into to actually get something like interesting out of it. Like something like this. I mean, this is just a long, terrible improvisation that was recorded on a voice memo. So I had to do a lot of work to get it sounding like decent. So yeah, that was the original sample. I'm not gonna play the whole thing, obviously. But then what did that turn into? I basically created this chop here, which you're gonna hear. Oh, so one thing, there's a lot of effects. Ooh, sorry, I think I was just clipping the mic there. I'm a little too close. A lot of effects on this, so I'll talk about the effects, but they're all very simple. There's basically an EQ that's cutting out all of the low end and a little bit of the highs to get that kind of muffled sound. A drum bus, which I don't know what this is doing. Oh, this is increasing the transients. So basically what that means is it's taking all of the transient information, which again is when the audio peaks or whatever, and it's basically saying we're going to kind of make it less we're gonna make it like sharper sounding, I guess, or whatever. So if I take off the transient, and then if I put it back on, actually it doesn't. Does it do anything? Why did I put this on here? I might just be yapping. But yeah, a glue compressor. So this is a compressor, another compressor here, which has a sidechain on it. So sidechain is also this really important thing. Some people don't like sidechain. I kind of hate sidechain recently, but I've been using it. I used it in this song, which is like a couple of years, or maybe it's 2 years old now. But the sidechain is basically like it's taking audio information from another sound or sample or track in your song, and it's saying every time that there's a loud noise in this track, duck the audio of this track, of this the track that you're working on. So it's taking information from the kick, and it's saying every time the kick hits, duck the audio. So that's what it's doing basically, and then a reverb. Really simple, but this is the chop that I made from it. So that's the chop. Kind of a long chop. It's like 4 bars long. So let's see if there's actually anything interesting with the chop. So yeah, it looks like there's a couple time stretching things I did. So if you remember, we talked about, I think in the first lesson, these yellow markers are time stretcher markers. So I'm basically doing some basic time stretching stuff to get things on beat where I want them. I guess another thing is I do a lot of fades in the chop. Really, really small, minute fades in and out before or at the end of stuff. Sometimes I have this level of detail, sometimes I don't really care. But in this song, it just made sense because there was a lot of sidechain anyway, so there's a lot of like the audio ducking. So it's like, I don't want to have any really harsh sounds, so I'm kind of fading things in and out. And by the way, you can fade things again. I think we talked about this in the first class. Going to the edge of any sound and then just like dragging that little box, and then that's fading it. And then this little diamond shape is basically how severe the fade is. So you can change that. Let's Command Z that. Okay. So that's the chop. That was the first sample. The other thing that I did was I added this. So what I did was I put this on Pro Warp mode, and I pitched it up an octave, 12 semitones. A bunch of little things. And I added a bunch of delay. There's actually panning on it, which again you can't hear through the Twitch stream, but that's what I did. So when you play all of this together, you get these kind of weird... kind of weird, interesting little artifacty things that are kind of fun. By the way, if you guys have any questions, just mention in the chat. I think we only have one viewer though, so I don't know. Hopefully you're enjoying this. Yeah, that's the sample. That's the main sample. So the technique I used there was basically chopping, time stretching, pitching, a lot of effects. Those were the kind of main things I did. There's a lot of other samples in this song, but they're all kind of weird. So this is kind of one of my favorites. I'll go through the rest of the song later, but this is kind of my favorite. So it's this really like noisy synth, and you'll notice that I'm using Simpler right here in the bottom. This was the original sample, by the way. Oh my god, I'm so sorry to whoever's poor ears are listening to this. So that was my philosophy teacher in grade 12 screaming. I don't know why, I forget what point he was making, but he told everyone to turn on their microphones, and then he was going to scream, and then the scream would echo through the microphones and make the weird sound that you hear at the end here, this sound. I don't know why he was talking about this in philosophy class. But anyway, I took that sound, this last sound here, and I was like, that's a really nice sound, I can sample that. So I put it in a simpler. I basically chopped it so it was just this end part. So actually if I can play it on my keyboard right now. It's taking just the very end of the sample, and it's in a loop mode here. So loop basically lets you just loop a section of the sample. So I can play this for as long as I want, forever if I want to. And then there's a fade in and fade out, which you can change here on the loop length and fade knobs. There's a lot of noise, so it's kind of an interesting sound to choose, and it's a little weird. I mean, it's not really even like on pitch fully, but it works. But there's a lot of obviously processing, very basic stuff, just a compressor and some reverb. If I can play Mary Had a Little Lamb. Guys, isn't this so entertaining and so fun? Aren't you having so much fun? Anyway, yeah, so that was the other main sample that I was kind of happy with, and it turned into this cool little synth part. I mean, it doesn't sound very cool by itself, I guess. I can show you some of the layers of the synths later. I think that's what kind of makes this song interesting. Yeah. I mean, there's so much noise in this synth, it almost doesn't make sense to use as a synth, but it's interesting. So yeah, those are already like two different, like this is a very granular way of using the sample. I'm using like such a very small part and I'm looping it and I'm like manipulating it so much just to get this weird sound. So you can do a lot with your sample manipulation. Obviously, this is just like very basic stuff. So I'll play from the beginning some of the stuff. Yeah, so it started also with this. I have this. I've just played this on a MIDI keyboard. Whatever. There's a delay on it. There's some distortion and stuff to make it kind of sound more gritty and digital. There's this piano over that. This piano has a lot of weird stuff on it too. A lot of like texture and noise. So I can, oops, sorry, my fault. I can play them together. You can kind of hear that. There's this kind of cool arpeggio thing. Then there's like stuff like this. Interesting stuff. A lot of just textural stuff. The same whistle. Then really important is the bass. This is just a bass that is stock Ableton. And then I did this really insane thing, like you should not EQ like this. I cut out all of the high, boosted the super, super low, which is probably not good, and then added a saturator, which is a distortion plugin or effect. So, interesting stuff. I'm saying interesting, but it's not really that interesting. And then, yeah, so all of that together, if I just play it for you, it's kind of fun thing. You can hear there's a lot of texture, so I have these 3 layers of just ambience below it, which is just like stuff I've recorded, stuff that I found online. I can play maybe part of it for you. Just a lot of noise and texture, which is fun. I think one of the things is like if you ever have a boring beat, just add some like vinyl crackle and it'll sound like it's more interesting. Yeah. I guess we can get to the meat and potatoes. We have this kick. Really simple kick. I don't know, it's just a kick. And then the snare, which is I think a rim shot. Yeah. So these are all drum samples. I just dragged them in. I think the snare is a little weird. I don't remember where I got the snare from. I have no idea. This could just be from like a sample pack or something. But one thing I do is I like to do my drums in audio. A lot of people like to do it in MIDI, which is something we talked about in the first lesson. I like doing it in audio because I can do things like this, which you can also do in MIDI, but I have like a little more control. I feel like I have the snare coming early on the beat. So if I put the metronome on, you can hear it's a little bit before the metronome. It's kind of hard to hear, but it is, trust me, which gives it a little more groove. One thing is like you don't want your drums always being on the right I mean, sometimes you do want your drums being like perfectly on beat, but sometimes it's fun to have it a little off beat. Another sample here. I think this is a sample from the count. This EQ is doing a lot of the work. If I take off this EQ, there's a kick in there. It's crazy. I'm just chopping it kind of willy-nilly, but then I EQ'd it. This kind of acts as a shaker. So if I add it with the kick. So that's kind of fun. One thing I would say a lot too is don't be afraid to like sample, like pull from yourself, I guess. Like I didn't have a shaker, so I just made noises with my mouth that sounded like shaker. So hopefully this doesn't sound terrible. Yeah, just me going over and over. Ugh, so ridiculous. Anyway, but yeah, I did that. I got these sounds, so whatever. I mean, it adds texture to this song. I did this all over the album that the song is on, which just make mouth noises. Sounds really sus. Obviously, I have toms here. You know, basic drums. I mean, the drums are really so basic, like so ridiculously basic that it's almost like funny. But by the way, this like triple snare thing, that that kind of technique, you see it a lot in certain genres, but I found that in a lot of Knowledge beats. I really like Knowledge, really cool producer. If you haven't heard of Knowledge, you should check him out. And he has a collaboration project with Anderson .Paak called No Worries. He does this a lot. He does the triple snare thing a lot, but I love it. It's just like such a cool, fun groove, a little unexpected. Yeah, those are the drums. Then we have the bass line. I mean, there's so much noise in this bass. So interesting. You know, we've already showed you this melody. There's these synths, and then obviously the main piano part. Oh yeah, that's also something really interesting. Again, I feel like I'm just like, I don't know, it's not that interesting. Like I kept in the sound of the chair creaking when I was playing piano, and it actually adds a lot of texture if you listen to the whole beat. You can hear it kind of quietly in the background, but I purposely like remember putting this in. Yeah, you could see I like stretched the sample just specifically so that creak would be on beat. So kind of an interesting, fun thing. This is another sample here. So what is kind of cool about this one is this is, again, I think a count sample. Shout out the count. Really good sample packs on that guy. But I basically just chopped this ARP. And then these 3 notes. It's actually the same note 3 times, you could see, but I'm pitching it. So this is up 3, up, or -2, and then 0. Another little sample technique is, yeah, you literally just chopping one thing and being like, okay, well, I'm going to use this for my own melody. I'm going to steal that. So that's another cool thing. Couple effects, like there's this reverse simple. So again, to reverse the sound, you can click on it and click R. So that's how I got that. And then there's this crescendo thing. It's a timpani or something like that. Really cool sound. Love that sound. Yeah, I guess that's it. There's not that much more with the beat. I mean, it's a lot. Oh, yeah, I forgot about this. There's this cool tom part at the beginning. Yeah, kind of sounds robotic a little bit. Yeah, that's it's the beat. I had a more interesting beat I wanted to show you, but I mean, the ones I wanted to show you would either get copyrighted or I tried to open the project file for one of my songs that I really like that had a cool simpler technique, but I literally could not open the file for some reason. I think it corrupted and I think I lost it, which is so unfortunate. So it's just kind of gone now, unfortunately. So my fault, my fault. But yeah, that's the sampling stuff. I guess I still have time, but I really should study for exams. But yeah, those are some sampling techniques. I hope this is helpful for somebody. I mean, there's nobody in chat, so it's hard to really know. Um, but yeah, those are the sampling techniques and things that I use often. Yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I mean, I don't know. There's really nobody out there. I feel this is like reverse XQC. His ass with the like. I mean, whatever. I don't know. I'm not a Twitch person. I don't really know all the Twitch drama. Sorry, this is going out so off the rails, but yeah, that's sampling, I guess. I'm not sure if I can think of any other like tips or tricks for sampling, but I think the most important thing really is like patience and like really trying your best to create something new out of a sample. I think if you're taking a sample, and there's some artists who do this great, take a sample and just loop it, and then it becomes kind of part of their song. And that's fine. That's completely fine. I actually have no problem with that. I think it's really cool when people are able to like reinterpret samples and stuff like that. But I think really try just working on it and really try like fucking it up and like try a million things. If it doesn't work, that's fine, but like really try like diving into the sample. I mean, I've had samples where I would take like a single snare from the sample and then like that would like become the snare for the entire song, and it would be a snare that comes along with a chord, so there's like a lot of weird like dissonant stuff. There's a lot of different ways you can like fuck around with samples in like interesting and cool ways that are very fun and nice and cool. Okay, I'm sorry guys. I'm sorry if this one wasn't as good as my previous ones when it like comes to explaining. I've been kind of scatterbrained with exams and a lot of like just kind of stressed in general. So hopefully this made sense. Let me switch back to our little stream ending slide. I hope you guys enjoyed, the one person who's watching this right now. Ooh, man, man, oh man, man, oh man. I feel like a madman. Okay, I'm gonna end a little bit early today, so my apologies. Good luck on exams for everybody, and yeah, I hope you guys. I mean, you'll be fine with exams. I think this is gonna be my last tutorial for the year, so I'll see you guys in the new year, and yeah.